Well, we're going to get started because it's back to back in this room, and I don't want to take time from Andrew's experiences as a leader. Can you hear us okay? My name is Nick Gowing. I happen to have authored a book on thinking the unthinkable, but Andrew has just written a book based on his experiences, 42 years in Dow Chemicals, and we want to talk about leadership and his insights. I'm not going to give you a CV at all, except to say that he writes about himself early on. He was raw, introverted, unconfident, outback boy from near Darwin. His father died at 15, and after that he moved to Queensland University, and the rest is on a CV which you can get off the app. So we're not going to go back into history, but I've got it right, and that you are introverted. We've got to remember, Andrew.
I can remember that. Distant past, though. That changed.
What I need to know is, why did you write this book? And it's easy to ask an author that, but I say that because many leaders simply don't have the time to read books at the moment. And indeed, The Economist has just in the last hour posted a blog which says leaders are overwhelmed and can't concentrate and cannot assume, cannot ingest stuff at the speed it's hitting them. Why did you write this?
Well, a lot of what you just said, I totally agree with, which is we're traveling in the digital age at the speed of live. We all have ADD. There is no such thing as news anymore. Everything's opinions, no fact-based sources for anything. Crises are continuing. Uncertainty prevails. This is a depressing start to this book conversation. I navigated many crises, and then I decided when I retired and went into my new life that the crises not only just continued, but leaders out there were reacting based on 20th century principles and 20th century institutions, and nobody was writing about the path forward in terms of how are we going to fill this leadership vacuum that's out there. And by the way, especially in the Western world, democracy and capitalism going through a divorce, short-termism a toxic disease, no long-term thinking. We are sitting in a world where leadership from governments is gone, and therefore we're sitting with a paradigm that someone needs to lead, and society is demanding it. I said, you know what, Andrew? You did this job at Dow, you had the privilege of a lifetime, you have a lot of insights, you gained them by being a maniac with travel, 40 countries a year. I went to the front lines. I didn't run from the headquarters, I ran Dow from in the front lines, and I looked at cultures and what was going on in places like this, and I said, I need to help leaders develop a playbook for how to operate in what is looking like chaos on a constant basis.
Do you think they'll read your book?
Well, they can hear it too. I taped it in my voice for 16 hours, and you can choose which part to hear. There are 3 very, very juicy stories in there for the Hollywood moment. So if you just want to read the Hollywood moments, I have lessons based on a boardroom coup, a near bankruptcy when the Kuwaitis nearly withdrew on us and the company disappeared, or almost disappeared, and then an activist attack, and he's here somewhere, by the way, best mate of mine now, that basically said, you're an idiot, Liveris. What you're doing for Dow, you can't possibly change a 120-year-old company. What are you doing to take the company through this paradigm of change? And then I merged with DuPont just to show it could be done, and we did it. And so those 3 stories make it an interesting listen, or pick the chapters and read that. However, I hope you do more than that.
But going forward, you still keep, as you say, your pre-CEO memo pad, because you were meticulous about researching what you wanted to do, how you wanted to do it. But you then say that CEO memo pad is largely obsolete.
Absolutely.
In other words, you're saying that the way leaders become leaders is no longer relevant.
Yeah, I mean, what I do in the book is you never ever can take a shortcut on content. You have to know your vertical. You have to know your subject better than anyone else. But that is not good enough anymore. What the world has delivered us with digitalization, previous panel talked about it, environmental change of massive proportions like climate change, social inclusion and justice and the paradigm of equity governance failing at the board level and at the country level. We've got the collision of forces. So what I said is that playbook I did 20 odd years ago when I became CEO is totally irrelevant. It's a good checkpoint on myself. What I say in the book is content with context. Context you can't teach. You have to experience. And to experience it, you have to change your leadership style. Agility, perseverance, resilience, pivoting in the moment, changing yourself. I have 6 versions of CEO. I changed myself 6 times I could remember to make those pivots. And what I write about in the book is how to do that. Age group in here, roughly, mostly on the younger side, especially true for younger people. But for us who are on our other side of life, golden years, you can still learn this. And it's the paradigm to change what is failing out there.
Let me put to you, Andrew, and I'm quoting from your book, business leaders lack a toolbox for this century. No country or company was equipped for any of the events they're now facing. I therefore want to explore with you what will equip them, the kind your peers, your successors as well, who think they have to do things in the way it's always been done, but actually that doesn't qualify them for what they're now facing.
Yeah, so the last chapter is my optimism for answering that question, and I give some prescriptions on what needs to be done to actually cause that to happen. And it starts and ends with something that's happening here at FII, which is, I believe, bottoms up change management is the only paradigm. Top down, with some visible exceptions, namely this one, where you have a top-down leader that has a vision, has a long-term plan, has courage, and is mobilizing a nation into aligning that change, very rare. I can count that many countries on not just one hand, but actually on one finger that are doing that. So that's not going to work. So that's not going to be the answer. Bottoms up. Bottoms up means what? Creating collaborative regional capabilities. So Saudi Arabia, work with your neighbors, align, help Africa, align, get people at the bottom of the pyramid involved, get the win-win. As said yesterday so articulately by the energy minister, we have a major energy poverty in the world, in Africa and around the world. Working with regional answers is the way forward. Globalization 1.0, done and dusted. Globalization 2.0 is the sum of regions, regional ecosystems. And it starts with you in each of your jobs. The community-based ecosystem you're in, you can build what I have in the book as how to change things at the local level. Community, company, work with countries in your neighborhood, align for purpose. That's, I think, the answer the world is demanding.
There's a lot of sound coming through here. Can you
I can hear it out there.
You can hear it.
And it's regionalization at work.
I'm very struck by one of the things you wrote in the book, the urgency. Given the urgency of ESG, the climate emergency, the pandemic, and the structural changes which we're all discussing here, you say it took Dow 30 years to pass through the 5 Ds, which are denial, to defy, to debate, to dialogue, and then to do. But 30 years. At the moment, the expectation is change in 30 weeks.
Yep.
How do they do it?
Yeah, so funny you should ask me about the 5 Ds. I had a meeting with one of the very senior ministers just now, and he had obviously read that part of the book and said, Saudi Arabia is in the 5th D. It's doing.
That's do.
It's do. We need do tanks, not think tanks. We're done, forgive the pun, with hot air. The dialogue endlessly. Humanity has no clue how to emerge with what gets done. I dare say COP28 is going to give you that paradigm. I've been to quite a few COPs, lots of great discussion, no action plan. Certainly no action plan where people align. People align to get things done. You're shaking your head, so I'm not sure where you're going with that, but I'll get to you in a minute.
I think you're being optimistic.
Well, okay, so there I am. So I need examples where I can scale doing. Defiance, denial. Society is saying, you guys who lead us, get with the program. One planet, solve that. My God, how do we solve that without an action plan? Invest in carbon sequestration and storage. Invest in pump hydro. Invest in small modular reactors. Do some scaling and prototype and examples. Stop talking about how fossil fuels are bad. We got it. We get that. Now, give us the solutions on the technologies. Give us a market price on carbon. There's action plan. But who's doing that? Pretty much everyone is debating and then dialoguing and not doing.
Let me put to you something you've invested in, the Liveris Academy in Queensland, in Brisbane. And you've invested in teaching better leadership. Now, Paul Polman, who was chief executive of Unilever until 4 years ago, he's chair of the Side Business School in Oxford. He has said publicly, we've got to change everything in this school. We cannot have business leaders who are teaching the old way of doing things. Is that a real anchor chain?
Yeah, so Academy, my wife and I gifted our university on the premise that we create this academy using our financial resources, but the vision of what's in the book. And Paul, who was on my board at Dow, and I'm a great admirer of his and what he's done, is dead on. I hate to say it to everyone out there, don't bother with your MBA. What they're teaching you, forget it. Go and learn in the real world how to lead in the paradigm he talks about and I talk about. Now, it doesn't mean we give up. I haven't. I've built this institution, and now guess what's happening? The MBA school's coming to our academy and saying, hey, what you're teaching there seems more relevant. Let's change our curricula. At Said, he's trying to do the same thing. I'm on various boards in the US trying to do the same thing. Academies that have purpose-driven motives in the paradigms of the 21st century teach horizontal, don't teach vertical. And the curricula of last century was vertical. Chemical engineer, do chemical engineering. Accountancy, do accountancy. Lawyers, do lawyers. That stuff, done, gone. You have to go to horizontal contextual teaching, which is what my academy is doing. 110 students, all of our scholarships are awarded. I have around 1,000 applicants now. We only started it 3 years ago.
Now, Andrew, let's talk about the principles here. You say doing well and doing good. There's a difference there.
Yeah.
And secondly, becoming more inclusive to benefiting the collective. Now, for you as a major corporate leader, to be talking about the collective, that obviously raises interesting visions of the Soviet grain fields, the collectives. But I'm putting that to you because at a time of ESG, and I'm wearing the lapel here, at the time of ESG and the time of the climate emergency, understanding the need for collective is now something which is urgently needed, but is difficult to sell to a lot in leadership.
Well, I already said in the Western world, democracy and capitalism is going through a divorce. I say in the book, do not interpret that as we want communism and socialism. No, thank you. That was the 20th century experiment. That's gone.
But you use the word collective.
Yeah, I do. But I also developed the thought into something Paul's very strong on, and others, the B team, which is a member of. It's the term inclusive capitalism. Inclusive capitalism, take you down two thought processes there to make my point. Firstly, you say inclusiveness, and yet in pretty much every country in the world, males and females are not paid the same for the same work. What? So it's not just quota, i.e. get females up, which of course this country is doing in spades, but for the same work, there should be no gender pay cap. How are we living with that? Inclusive capitalism cannot pay half the available workforce less just because of their gender. All right, so there's a problem set that can be solved, okay? And corporations need to solve it. So I solved that at Dow, but it took a lot of work. Trust me, a lot of work. Second one, you said ESG, sustainability. Sustainability is not compliance and regulation. Sustainability is a strategy. And if you can develop a strategy to absolutely, totally do full recycle, take emissions out of everything. At Dow we said footprint, handprint, blueprint. Footprint, the factories. Handprint, the products. Blueprint, the planet. If I have a strategy that develops products and technologies to basically change our footprint and handprint, I can actually be the first to develop technologies that no one of my competitors can do. Then I go to government and say, government, you want zero carbon, net zero carbon, you want zero emissions, you want you want total recycling. Here are the programs and the policies, and guess what? The total available market to me is massive. It's a bit like taking the early lead on AI. You take the biggest risk, you get the biggest reward. That's what we need to do with ESG. Make it an inclusive strategy to develop the technologies, to develop the answers, to get governments to put in the right policies.
Andrew, we've got 4 minutes left, but the reason I'm pursuing this is because of, you quote Mark Benioff, the founder and executive chair of Salesforce, fantastically successful. He says, as a capitalist, I believe it's time to say out loud what we all know to be true. Capitalism as we know it is dead. He then goes on, and you quote him at length, it's time for a new capitalism, a more fair, equal, sustainable capitalism, which works for everyone, where businesses, including tech companies, don't just take from society, but truly give back and have a positive impact. If we're talking in a year or two, not because of the book, but because of what's changing, do you reckon there will be that kind of seismic change in leadership?
We do, and as you can tell, I'm a big fan of Mark's. I'm on his advisory board. What I think he's doing, and in the digital world, probably one of the few, is finally coming to the table and saying, government, regulate me. Government, internet should not be free. Government, we need boundary conditions on AI. Government, we need to take this amazing tool that we've all developed and then figure out a way how humanity can benefit, and we should participate in that. That's inclusive capitalism. That's exactly the thought. Now, at Dow, why would I go to Washington, which felt like constant root canal surgery, and deal with the bureaucrats to teach them how to regulate me better? The obvious. If I, with my scientists, my 750 PhDs, weren't educating the bureaucrats who had no clue on chemistry, on how to regulate chemistry, that's on me, okay? The regulatee has to teach the regulator to get a smart regulation, which is not an oxymoron. You can have a smart regulation. That's what's happening with the digital age right now, and Mark's taking the lead. This is a powerful tool for humanity that needs regulation by putting in place expertise, private-public expertise, to do it. And that model, by the way, it happened in Singapore on many things, is happening here.
Finally, Andrew, though, what about the fact that there is a culture which is the Friedman culture still, which is basically maximize shareholder return as opposed to stakeholder return? Is that shifting or not?
Well, listen, in the book I say the top 27 people in the world have as much wealth as the bottom 3.5 billion. It's time to toss Friedman out. You cannot live on this planet and tolerate that. You cannot, okay? And I think people need to have the courage to say it. You asked me a side question over there. Would you have written this book while you were still at Dow? And I grappled with the answer, right? I said, maybe not. But you know what? I take back my words.
But can these principles go through any board now and any board chairman?
Yes, you can. A whole chapter dedicated how to change boards, okay?
Do they know how to change themselves?
No, they don't. So you need disruptors. You need disruptors. So I'm basically saying to every board member out there, become a disruptor. And what's the worst that can happen to you? You lose your job because you're doing the right thing. We need more people to be willing to lose their job because they're doing the right thing, like Benioff. And I think that's what needs to happen at boards, and I'm actually pushing that on all the boards I'm at. But no one's thrown me out yet.
But do you reckon that that is practical, even if you're around? There are many people who get put on boards now or accept board appointments who then say, I made a mistake.
Yeah, it is acceptable, because 20th century, that person stays there and outlives their welcome, okay? And there's music playing. So basically, remember the introverted me, okay?
I haven't seen it.
No, you haven't seen it, right? I changed myself because I got so frustrated seeing the wrong thing being done and perpetuated. So you know what? Change yourself and push and lean in and make the change happen or be changed.
Andrew Liveris, I'd love to be talking
Thank you. Thank you.
at much greater length. Disruption has a kink in it here, but I can urge you to read it or listen to Andrew reading it for you over 16 hours. Andrew, thanks enormously
Thank you.
for inspiring us, but I'd love to be talking to you in a year or two
Let's
to
do it.
find out if we are making those kind of changes.
You've got a date. I'll do it. You got a date.
We have witnesses.
Witnesses here. The audible version, I've added some humor. So if you want to listen to that.
You had humor today.
Okay, there you go. So there
Now,
you go.
I've got a difficult job. I've got
I'm
to say
out.
goodbye to you.
I'm out.
And I've got to introduce the minister from Helsinki.
I'm gone.
All right,
So,
thanks, Andrew.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thank you.
Nick. Take
Thanks.
care. All the best.